What's going on, Johnny Nation? Welcome to episode 90 of the Eye of the Storm podcast. My name is David Barov, and it's the fourth installment of Coachcast as we welcome back St. John's Assistant Coach Bob Walsh. St. John's is 13-7 on the season, 5-4 in the Big East, following a much-needed win over Villanova inside Madison Square Garden last Wednesday, snapping a 3-game losing streak. We last spoke about a month ago before St. John's went on a 3-game winning streak, beating Butler, Villanova, and Providence, and then losing to Creighton, Seton Hall, and Marquette. Assistant Coach Bob Walsh, welcome back.
What's happening, Dave? How you doing?
All good. Bob, the Big East is arguably the best and most competitive league in the country, and given the 3-game winning streak St. John's went on, and then the 3-game losing streak before snapping it on Wednesday, what has been your general observation of where St. John's stands the last few weeks?
I think we're in a good spot. I think we'd like to be in a better spot. You know, we're in the mix. Where you stand is you're about as good as your next game. So when you're 4-1, you can't look at the schedule and go, okay, 4-1 after 5 games. We'll be 16-4 at the end. We'll have a great year. Things change quickly in this league. We were talking about Providence. They were 2-0. They were beating Seton Hall by 10 points at home, looking at a 3-0 start, and Bryce Hopkins goes down. They lose that game. They end up losing 4 in a row, and next thing you know, they're 2-4. So, we went through a 3-game losing streak, and it was just about beating Villanova. That was our next game. We lost 2 games by 1 point to teams that are probably going to the NCAA tournament. We had an awful night at Seton Hall with, Jordan was sick, coach was sick, he wasn't there. So you got to just focus on your next game. So we're in the mix. That's where we stand. We're in a good spot, but we got to go out and win our next game. And if we lose our next game, then the next one after that becomes even more important. So it really is the type of thing where you're about as good as how you prepare for your next game, and hopefully we can get the next one done. And we'll be 6-4 halfway through the league.
I have to ask you about Providence since you just brought it up and you've got your Providence ties. What'd you think of Saturday's game, Georgetown, Providence? I know you tweeted something about asking Providence fans to be on their best behavior or something like that. What was it like watching that from afar?
It was cool to watch it. When you've been I was a coach at Providence for 10 years in 2 different stints, and you really understand that fan base. First of all, New England is arguably the most territorially loyal sports fan base anywhere, right? They root for the local teams. There aren't a lot of Cowboy fans in New England. They root for the Patriots. There aren't a lot of Laker fans. They root for the Celtics. So, and Providence is a minor league town with one major league sport, and that's Providence basketball in the winter. So the fans there are terrific, and they don't like being told they're not good enough. And regardless of what you think about what Coach Cooley did, and it's his decision, and, fans are going to be fans. I actually was really impressed. I knew the energy in the building would be great. I was worried it might take a really negative turn, which it actually didn't. Yeah. And I mean, I was getting texts at 8:30 in the morning from people who were lined up outside of Murphy's, 4 hours before tip. And I said, oh boy, this could go in the wrong direction. And it didn't. And I actually spoke to Brian Blaney, who's a friend of mine on the Georgetown staff afterwards. And he said, to be honest, it was great. Like, the arena was electric, but it wasn't out of control, and they handled it really well. And give Providence, the administration credit for that. I think it was a really fascinating situation. But then once, the boos happen and Coach Cooley goes back out on the floor, you got a Big East basketball game, which came down to the wire. And Providence was really fortunate to come away with a win. But ultimately, that's, like we said, you just got to win your next game. And that's really the storyline.
Yeah. Came down to the wire until Devin Carter did what Devin Carter does. And St. John's fans know all too well what Devin Carter can do. Drop 31 on us, and he played like a superstar against Georgetown. Bob, you mentioned Seton Hall. So I have to ask, shortly before the game, Coach Pitino and Jordan Dingle ruled out because they were sick with COVID. St. John's proceeds to start the game 0 of 10 from the basket. I was there. It was torture. They fought back to tie the game, and eventually the game got out of hand. It was a performance that seemed very odd to me. I chalked it up to an anomaly because guys just didn't look like themselves. It's not a game that St. John's, we could draw from in regards to, hey, in other losses, they looked like this. So to me, it was very much an anomaly. Obviously, you know, think something was wrong besides Coach Patino and Dingle weren't there. So in your eyes, and you were on the sidelines, obviously, were some guys not 100%? Was it just a perfect storm of things that went wrong? What happened in that game?
Yeah, I was there too. It wasn't a lot of fun. Yeah, I wish I had a really good answer for you. I'm not really one to play the result, which is something I think that happens a lot in athletics. And we got hammered, and then you could look at it afterwards and go, well, that's because of this, or it's because of that, or it's because of that. We got it handed to us by a team that played really well. I can't tell you why we came out sort of, misfiring. Obviously, missing coach has an impact, right? But we also have a veteran team. We have a veteran coaching staff. When coach told us, and it wasn't until right before the game, it was a couple hours before the game that we found out he wasn't going to coach and that Jordan wasn't going to play. I think we all felt confident that we could still go in there and win. But obviously when the ball went up, we didn't have what we needed to, whether it was competitive edge, whether it was the ability to bounce back, whether it was the mental toughness. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter. We got beat by a better team that night. We just kind of had to learn from it, and then you got to try and bounce back. Your next game is now your most important game. So, do I think we miss coach on the sidelines? Absolutely, because he just brings. I mean, he's a Hall of Fame sideline coach who brings a relentless approach to everything. And when he's not there, the tone is a little bit different. It's just natural. Your relationship with the players as an assistant coach versus when you're a head coach is different, right? As an assistant coach, you're kind of filling in the blanks with the players, and you know them on a different level. So the product didn't look good that night. Was it one thing? No, if it was one thing, we probably would have lost a close game or lost by 5 or lost by 8, but we got handed to us pretty good. Luckily, coach is really good at, you learn from it, you take what you can from it, and then you flush it and you move on to the next thing. And it's all about winning the next game. So it was not a great night. Good thing about the Big East is you get to play them at your place too. Yeah. And hopefully we'll have a better night when Seton Hall shows up at the UBS Center.
With Jordan Dingle not playing in that game and you guys finding out shortly before the game, how much does losing a piece like that, I know the mantra is like next man up, but when you lose a significant piece like that and your rotations change, your personnel kind of changes, I mean, how big of an adjustment is that on the fly for a staff, shortly before a game?
It's hard to tell exactly how much it impacts you. It certainly impacts you, but it's part of the deal. So we don't sit there and go, well, okay, Jordan's not going to play. So, it's more than just next man up. It's like, okay, who's going to be in that spot? What are our matchups going to be? What's our rotation going to be like? Does it involve, Brady Dunlap playing some at the 2 spot instead of the 3, or Sean Conway? So you have to figure that stuff out. Ultimately, though, we went to Villanova without Chris Ledlam, and, we won that game. They didn't have Justin Moore. We had a chance to win at UConn. Well, they didn't have Donovan Clingan. I mean, that happens, Providence loses Bryce Hopkins. Xavier's lost 2 starters the entire year. So you do have to sort of game plan around it. Like, hey, Jordan's 20 to 25 minutes. Where are we going to go? How are our matchups? Where it really hurt us was when Naheem got hurt a minute into the Marquette game. And now all of a sudden in the middle of the game, 6-7 minutes in, he's down. And now we're without 2 veteran, guards that play a lot of minutes for us. That's the kind of stuff that makes it harder. It's hard to quantify exactly how much losing someone like Jordan. It certainly hurts. It hurts the depth. It hurts with the experience. It hurts with the ability to mix up the matchups. But ultimately nobody cares, right? At the end of the
Yeah.
day, they don't make accommodations in the standings for misfortune. You just play. And at the end of the day, Seton Hall was better than us and we lost.
It was important coming off of that loss to bounce back. Again, I chalked it up to an anomaly, but it was only going to be an anomaly if St. John's played differently in the next game. Fortunately, they looked like a much different team against Marquette, but fell short by one at Madison Square Garden. A lot has been talked about the final few possessions in that game, with Chris Ledlum taking the three in front of the St. John's bench, and then the missed Danis three that came short. In regards to the three that Chris took, was there a discussion about taking it to the rim, given that it was a 1 point game, or even after when watching film of driving or possibly trying to draw the foul? And then with the final shot, given that there was only 4.3 seconds left, is that a situation where you just are hoping for a good look and a chance?
On the first question, I think the way coaches and the way our offense is run, we want the ball to have energy, right? We want the ball to find the open man. I don't think in a situation like that, you sit there and say, hey, here's where it's going to be. You're going to be in the corner and you're going to shoot an open three, or you're going to, come off a screen here and take a pull up, because, the defense dictates some of that too. So really the way coach likes to see it is the ball moves and whoever's open shoots it. And Chris Ledlum got a great look at a three. Yep. We didn't sit there and say, hey, we want a three, or hey, let's try and get to the rim and get a layup. But if not, because you don't want your guys sort of thinking their way out there. Chris had a great look. We all thought it was going in the whole way. Yep. And he just missed it, and that happens. On the last possession, we had about, I think it ended up being 4.3 seconds to try and get it up the floor. What we wanted to do, and coach set something up, was to get to make a pass up the court, right? I think in that situation, you don't want to just throw it into a guy and have him take 3 or 4 dribbles and try and get as close as he can to the hoop. If you pass the ball, it's going to move a lot quicker than if you're dribbling the ball. So he had Joel flash. Joel got the ball. Joel actually made a great play, took a dribble, threw it ahead over Ejiofor to DJ. And at that point, stepping into a three, even though it was kind of deep, that's really about as good a look as you're going to get in that situation. Because if you throw the ball 75 feet, it really becomes just a jump ball, and you're trying to get it. We're able to get it up the floor. We're able to get a decent look. Unfortunately, it didn't go in.
After that game, 3 losses in a row lead up to the Villanova game, an opponent that you already beat early in Big East play on the road. Given where you are in this season, and perhaps it wasn't a must-win game, but to myself and many others, it was important to stop the bleeding. Winning by 20 and doing so with great defense, arguably the best defense St. John's has played all year. What went right, and how do you bottle that effort up and carry it the rest of the way?
It was certainly the type of game we needed at that point. And we've talked about the Big East schedule, right? You always feel like after you lose a game, wow, we could be in trouble here. And then after you win a game, it's like, okay, we're right back where we need to be. We had lost 3 in a row, and it was like, look, if we win our next game, we'll be 5-4. We'll have swept Villanova, which is important in the standings now and trying to get to an NCAA tournament. When you play every team twice, teams that you sweep, especially teams that are expected to be in the tournament, that really helps. So, hey, look, we've lost 3 in a row, but being 5-4 and having a sweep of Villanova, we'd look pretty good. And then we go into a bye week where we have, a weekend off, and we can hopefully get healthy and, keep getting better. So it was the type of game we needed. The way our defense played in that game and the energy was just really high level. And we got great energy from our bench. Glenn Taylor was terrific. Zuby was terrific. Those guys are bringing an edge into the game. Simeon started the game, but he gave us some really good minutes and maybe more minutes than he had been playing. So how do you bottle it? I think you understand, you try and get the guys to understand that should be every day, right? Like the effort that you give defensively, the toughness, the energy, the connection, That's something that travels. It travels to Xavier. It travels to UConn, to Providence. And that really has to become our identity. We've become a much better defensive team since,
Yes.
say the beginning of December. And it's not that easy to get guys to understand that, so, but I thought we were connected. I thought we were really alert, getting into our different defenses, on certain makes, we're in this, we're in that. We switched it up. We kept Villanova, off balance. And I think if you look at a theme in our wins in the Big East, and even, some of the games, heck, 3 games, we had a chance to win on the final possession at UConn, at Creighton, and Marquette. We've been able to keep the other team's offense off balance with pressure, some of the switching that we do, some of the other stuff. So hopefully that will continue as we get into the second half of Big East play.
I mentioned on the recap episode that we did of that game that it just looked like the defense and guys were so much more active and I guess focused. I likened it to when you kind of see on playgrounds or even in like lower level ball when guys are pressing and they're kind of waving their hands like this all over the place. I feel like you just saw a lot more energy out of the guys. I thought, like you mentioned, Glenn was great. I thought Joel's defense was really good in that game. So that really stood out. And, you kind of just hope that it kind of carries and travels on the road to Xavier. Uh, Bob, after the Villanova game, Coach Pitino emphasized how important the win was. And he said that he told the older guys if they wanted to get to the NCAA tournament, that this was a game that they had to win. And for you guys, I mean, was there a heightened sense of urgency in the locker room leading up to the game? I mean, how does the staff handle the losing streak and just trying to keep the players' heads up? We've heard Joel talk about he was letting past possessions kind of eat at him and get to him. So what's the coaching staff doing just to try and get guys to, not dwell on all the losing?
It's interesting. We talked about it a little bit earlier, how, the head coach has a different relationship than the assistants do. Coach does not pull any punches. I mean, he is direct as it gets, right? And he did say to the team, like, if we want to play in the NCAA tournament, we have to win this game, and if we end up in the same neighborhood as Villanova, it puts us ahead of them, and that's really, really important. I think as assistant coaches, you then have to take the pulse of the guys and make sure they understand that they're not putting too much pressure on themselves, right? Like, yes, we want Joel to have a sense of urgency and we want the seniors to realize how big this game is, but we also don't want them to panic, right? So that kind of becomes our job to say, hey, understand if we defend the way we're capable of, if we share the basketball and don't turn it over, we beat this team on the road without lead, we can win this game. And so those conversations have to happen. You want a heightened sense of urgency for every game. I mean, we're at the point, again, lose to Xavier and we'll feel like, oh no, what's going on here? Get a good win against Xavier on the road and have beat them twice, and we feel like we're in a great position, right? Every game is sort of a referendum on who you are. I thought the energy in the Garden for the Villanova game really made a difference. I thought, and again, I don't get into this too much. I think a home court advantage is great, but it was an 8:30 game. We had lost 3 games in a row. There is an easy way to look at that and be like, man, by the time we get to the Garden, it's probably going to tip at 8:45. We had a great crowd. I could feel the energy, right? Myself, 7:30, 8 o'clock as we're warming up. And our guys kind of felt it too, and there's something special about St. John's fans and playing in the Garden. That sort of translated into guys diving on the floor and guys rotating to block out and guys making multiple efforts and the stuff that we're preaching about defensively. So it really made a difference. I mean, look, Villanova struggled to get to 50. You hold teams in the 50s, you're going to win most of your games, and our defense really carried us that night.
Johnny Nation, you heard Assistant Coach Bob Walsh. To all the people that have been wishy-washy about coming to games, you hear what the Garden sounds like. You hear what the staff is saying about what the noise and what you showing up means. We've been talking about it on this podcast for months at this point. So please take heed if you're thinking about coming to the game, make it a point. Obviously, we're not going to have that issue against UConn in a week. 20-point win against Villanova. Everybody's feeling great. What was that locker room like after the game? The guys getting a win in front of actors, comedians, Jalen Brunson, Mikal Bridges, Josh Hart, former UFC champ Kamaru Usman, who came into the locker room afterwards. And, what does it say to the culture being built that, these kinds of celebrities are coming to watch St. John's play?
Well, it was exciting. And again, the energy in the building carried through. So obviously, we put a lot of time and effort into scouting, into game planning, into film work. Our guys, we're usually watching film, before practice and after practice, getting ready for our opponent, watching our mistakes. So there's so much investment into each game that, the post-game locker room is a lot of fun, and it feels like, we accomplished what we needed to. Then you take a deep breath and, you grab your Chick-fil-A and it's like, okay, now we got to go do it again, and luckily after that one, we do have a little time because we didn't play this weekend, but the energy, the garden, the stuff they play on the, you'll be trying to talk in a huddle during a timeout, and all of a sudden you hear some video and the crowd goes nuts, and you look up and somebody from The Sopranos is there or something like
Yeah.
that. It's I mean, it's why it's such a special place to play. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just you're it's the greatest spotlight on college basketball that you can have. So after a win like that, it's exciting in the locker room. The kids, coach, busts some chops and talks to some guys about making some mistakes and, bouncing back the next game. But the energy is really, really good. And we got to carry that over.
I guess you could also be excited that coach walks into the post game presser with some tequila and having a good time, but he was certainly happy with the performance as well. Somebody that we definitely was happy about performance wise was Joel Soriano, who broke out of his mini slump against Villanova. Got it back to his old ways, dropping 21 and 9. He seemed to be pressing the last few games. Even said that he was letting possessions just stick in his head 3, 4 possessions later. As a coach and someone who sees him every day and knows how vital he is to the entire offense, what goes into helping a player break out of a slump like that?
Trying to listen to him, to be honest. I just think so much of what we do is categorized as, telling them like, okay, this kid needs help. Well, let's tell him what we need to do or what he needs to do or what we want from him. And obviously there is some of that, but Joel has been playing for a long time and he's a veteran guy. You try and listen. Hey, Cap, like what's going on? Like, how are you feeling? Is your body sore? Do you need a break? What's the, he was certainly squeezing it a little too tight. You noticed when he'd make a mistake in practice or something wouldn't go right, he'd be really, really loud at himself, and it was like, okay, like, you missed a block out. Like, we'll get better. So I think listening to him is really important, especially a veteran guy, and just kind of see, hey, where you're at, what can we do to help you? Trying to get him involved early, with whether it's an out of bounds play and we're trying to get the ball inside or trying to get him in the post so he can get a feel for the basketball early in a game. And hopefully, again, we watch a lot of film. So there's a lot of pointers made about, hey, look at your footwork here in the post. Look at how high you are when you're trying to screen. You're not going to be able to post up there. Watch what happens when a shot goes up. So he definitely came with a ton of energy, and that makes us a different team. And he had multiple efforts. And when he has multiple efforts, his teammates follow him.
Yeah, second half, I believe he had 15 points. He was fired up and made some 3-point plays. So obviously Joel's the key to a lot of things, and getting him to break out of that is important. He had a really good game against Xavier the first time around. He'll look to do that again on Wednesday in Cincinnati. Bob, St. John's beat Villanova by 10 on the road and then 20 at home. We've talked about how much time you guys spend scouting. The fact that you guys swept the season series for the first time in over 30 years, what goes into handling a team twice like that? What kind of adjustments were made from game 1 to game 2 to make sure that Villanova couldn't prepare for you guys after the first game? What went into that matchup last week?
Well, it's incredible that it had been 30 years. I mean, I know Villanova obviously has a great run in the last 10 to 15 years, but
Yeah, I believe
when I saw
31.
when I saw that number, I couldn't believe it. It's funny. The first thing coach says when we play a team a second time is, okay, what are we going to do differently? They're going to be prepared for this. They're going to be prepared for that. So what can we do differently? Now, there's nothing you can do to, keep them from preparing for you. They're going to know who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Coach isn't saying, okay, let's throw a triangle and 2 in there, or let's, play a 1-3-1 half court zone just because they've never seen it before. At this point, teams know who you are and what you're all about. It's finding, maybe a small advantage, right? What are the baseline out of bounds plays that they haven't seen yet, or that, it worked against them the last time, but what's our counter, because they're going to be expecting that again. What type of, defensive adjustments are they going to make, and how do we counter that? Are they going to trap DJ off the ball screens? Do we have to have somebody ready to flash, or do we think they're going to be in a drop coverage and, we can get Joel rolling to the rim and create a 2-on-1? So it starts with coach really thinking about, and he asks us to think about, like, okay, what are we going to do? You're not just going to go out there and do the same things and be successful, certainly not against the team that has equal talent to you or is, in a similar position. So, a lot of it is broken down by the staff. We have 4 guys on each game with taking on different parts of the scouts. So, but ultimately it comes down to the players executing, right? And our defensive energy and our connectedness was really the key there. I'm not sure the defense we chose to play was as important as how we were playing together defensively. And I think that's ultimately why we're able to, control the game.
I'm pretty sure a lot of what you just said is going to answer this question too, but we're at the portion of the schedule where you're playing a lot of your opponents for the second time besides DePaul and Georgetown. Teams like Xavier, Providence, who you already beat at home, you're now going on the road to face. So, given that this is the second time around, is that really the approach? I mean, is it, watching more film from the first time? Is it watching how they're playing recently and adjusting to recent, trends? What goes into that second time around, really?
I think it starts with what worked and what didn't in your first game, right? So obviously, when we played them the first time, it was the first game of the year. They were one of the worst shooting teams in the Big East by number. They went 4 for 21 from 3 against us. And since then, they've been the best shooting team in the Big East, right? Since that game. So they were 39% from 3 in their 7 league games after us. Now, that doesn't include today's game against UConn. So now you're looking at a team that really wasn't shooting the ball that well to, like, okay, guys, this is the best shooting team in the Big East, right? And we have the best 3-point field goal defense in the Big East. So getting the team to understand, I think Xavier averages like 81 points at home and they average 72 points on the road, right? So going into a place where they're a lot more comfortable and they shoot better, they're going to be different. But then it really comes down to, so you start with the game you played, then you look at anything they're doing differently, right? What they're doing differently is they're shooting the ball a lot better. So you've got to be prepared for that. But then it's really what's the core of who they are, right? Like Xavier plays at the fastest pace in the league. What we did in the first game was we were able to keep them sort of off balance with our pressure, with some zone mixed in, with some of the matchups and the way we switched and stuff like that. We never let them get comfortable in their transition game or their half court flow to get going at a great pace. And that's the core of who they are. That'll be the biggest key for us, is to keep them out of transition and to keep them from being comfortable offensively. Ultimately, our defense is going to have to be better than their offense for us to win the game.
How much do you look at their game today against UConn, where they lost by 43 points, and try to see what UConn did so well besides be the #1 team in the country?
They made 17 threes. So we'll go out tomorrow and see if we can make 17 threes in a 40-minute game. And if we can do that Wednesday, we'll be pretty good. No, it's interesting. You see a blowout like that, and you almost want to. I mean, I watched the game. We'll watch it again just to see, did they do anything offensively that was different, which I really didn't see today. But ultimately, that's going to be about saying to our guys, look, guys, like UConn was great. Xavier wasn't very good. And they rolled over them. Like, this was an aberration. You look at pretty much every one of Xavier's games since we played them, right? I mean, they took UConn to the wire at Xavier a couple of weeks ago when UConn hit like 14 threes in that game. And UConn played great, and Xavier was winning in the second half. They went into Providence and hammered them. They scored 92 points to beat Georgetown. They played well at Creighton and had a lead late in that game. So they've actually played really, really well. Today was an aberration. Yeah. I don't think we're going to watch too much of it, with the team, because it's going to be like, hey, you guys saw the score. Look, it happened to us against Seton Hall. It happened to us against Michigan. It happens. That's not who Xavier is. And by the way, we're going to get a really hungry team that is desperate for a win because they've now lost 2 in a row.
So St. John's heads to Cincinnati on Wednesday to play Xavier at the Cintas Center. Tough place to play. 3 of the next 5 games for St. John's are on the road. Winning on the road has been a incredibly tall task in the Big East this year for teams. Is there anything that you guys as a staff try to emphasize more on the road when trying to neutralize some of the home court advantage you'll face?
One of them is transition defense, and that's certainly going to be important. Coach talks about, kind of momentum plays, like transition defense is one of those things that, gets the crowd going, right? All of a sudden you don't get back. Another one is turnovers, which leads to, transition opportunities. Live ball turnovers, that turn into, 4 and 6 point swings, and now the crowd is getting into it. I think back to our Creighton game when we had a 9-point lead in the second half, and we had a couple of turnovers in a row, and now all of a sudden it's 5 and the place is going nuts. So mostly it's your fundamentals. It's what's important to you. But it's understanding, stuff like live ball turnovers and transition defense can give your opponents a little more of a boost because they can wake the place up. And now all of a sudden you're in a hornet's nest. And, that team has some momentum and has some confidence, and you've put yourself in a tough spot.
Given that we're a few days away from February, do you feel like the staff has a better idea of what they have in this roster at this point regarding more stabilization with the rotations and personnel, or is it still fluid given potential injuries and how guys are performing in practice day in and day out?
I think it's always fluid. I don't know if stable is ever a word I would use with any roster, just because, what guys do in practice every day matters, and Coach is a guy. I mean, you've seen our starting lineup change. He put Brady in the starting lineup because, I think it was at Villanova because Brady was playing really well. He did the same thing with Sim. Sometimes it's a matchup. It's, we need Glenn Taylor to guard this guy to start the game, or, we need, thinks we need more shooting in the lineup. So I think we have a very good idea of who we are. I don't know if that means, and look, who we are is we have, 10, 11 guys that can help us. We don't have a core of like 4 guys who are really good and then, 6 guys who are just role players. We've got talent that can really help us. So that's going to lead to guys, some games, you may play 8 minutes, and some games you may play 28 minutes, and you got to be ready for it.
We've seen improved play recently from Zuby Ejiofor, especially on offense. Simeon Wilcher, like you just mentioned, got his first start against Villanova. I thought played really well, especially in those first 4 minutes. He hit 2 really good jumpers there at the end of the first half that helped push a lead. What's been the key for both of them in their recent improvement and thus uptick in minutes?
Really important shots that Sim hit as they were kind of taking a little bit of control and getting back into the game, and we ended up, I think, with an 8-point lead. Really, it's perseverance. For newcomers playing for Coach, he is so demanding every single day, and it can be tough to get used to. And these guys are, every kid who comes to college is used to being the best player on his high school team, and being, having sort of, a confidence and a free reign where, your talent can make up for any mistakes you make. And Zuby and Sim both have had just terrific approaches, despite some games they haven't even, Sim hasn't even gotten in the game, right? Or, Zuby's had to sit and watch Joel for long stretches. So both of them are high character kids. That makes a big difference. They want to help the team however possible. They show up in practice every day, whether they're on the white team, they're on the red team. I do think Sim has really grown as a player as he's played more with DJ in practice, and that's something Coach wanted him to do. Like, he's a little bit more comfortable playing with the veteran guys, and feels like maybe he can make a mistake here or there, and they'll make up for him. And our veteran guys have been really encouraging to him, and Zuby's just a ball of energy. I mean, he just plays so hard all the time, and it's really paying off for him. I mean, the energy plays and the hustle plays that he makes in each game really have a huge impact for us, and it's really going to make a big difference for us down the stretch.
St. John's has Xavier on Wednesday. We've talked about they had a tough loss today, but St. John's has had a week off. Few questions for you. What's the status of Naheem Aline, who I know is working his way back from an injury? So what's his status for the game coming up? And what's this week of preparation and some days off been like for the team and for you guys? And how do you guys balance the time off that's a little bit unusual given how often you guys play with having to get ready for a road game?
Naheem has been back to practice. I don't know if he's 100%, but he's been in practice the last couple of days. So he looks good, and he's really important to us. Having 4 days before your next game and 2 days off, really the 2 days off are important. We took Thursday off, we took Sunday off. That gives our guys a chance to rest their bodies and get a mental break because we're coming right back to it. 2 days of practice and then three games in 7 days, right? With no breaks. So the mental part is really important for the guys to get away. I think giving their bodies a chance to rest, and kind of lift some of the fatigue. And then it gives you a chance to focus more on what you need to get better at, right? Like working on our one-on-one defense in transition and, working on our post guys getting deeper position and ducking in, and, the guards working on the pace of the offense when they're in some two-side action, stuff like that it gives you a little bit of focus just for a couple of days on all St. John's and not necessarily so much who you're playing. And I think that's refreshing. It's been, we've got to be one of the last teams in the Big East to have had a bye. We might be the last one. I don't know if everyone's had one by now, but we're pretty close. So it's a good mental and physical refresh, a chance to work on the things that we want to get better at. And now we've got 2 days to go prepare to try and get a big win at Xavier.
Absolutely. St. John's assistant coach Bob Walsh, thank you so much for joining me once again. Best of luck on Wednesday against Xavier. And after that, Johnny Nation, you better be at Madison Square Garden on Saturday. It is the game that everybody is talking about, St. John's and UConn. Some guy named Danny Hurley back at the Garden with Coach Patino, who certainly have no love lost. It's going to be a fun one, but the Johnny's got a big test on Wednesday against Xavier to handle first. Coach, thank you so much.
Always a pleasure, Dave. And I don't have any tickets for the UConn game. So you got Johnny Nation, you're on your own for that one, but hopefully we'll see everybody there.
Absolutely. Hopefully you got your tickets already. That's going to be a fun one. Johnny Nation, I'll catch you next time.